Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to Nine Nar Trees podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book. In the Kingdom of Ice by Hampton recounts one of the most harrowing chapters in the history of Arctic exploration, the U.S. Navy expedition of the USS Jeannette, which sailed in 1879 on an ambitious mission to reach the North Pole. Driven by a mix of national pride, scientific curiosity, and the era's shaky theories about an open polar sea, the crew pushed into the ice north of Siberia and soon found themselves trapped. What follows is a sweeping narrative of endurance and leadership under extreme pressure as months in darkness and crushing cold turn into a fight for survival. Sides draws on historical records and first-person accounts to reconstruct the expedition's shifting fortunes, from bold optimism to hard pragmatism. The book blends adventure storytelling with a clear sense of the political, technological, and human limits of 19th-century exploration, while showing how decisions made far from the ice could determine life or death in the polar night. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, ambition, national prestige, and the myth of the open polar sea. A central theme is how powerful ideas and incentives can outpace reality. The Jeannette expedition did not emerge in a vacuum. It grew from late 19th century competition for geographic firsts and the belief that disciplined planning and modern engineering could master any environment. Sides highlights the ways political backing, public fascination, and scientific aspiration intertwined, encouraging leaders to gamble on uncertain theories about Arctic conditions. One especially consequential notion was the open polar sea hypothesis, the belief that a navigable ocean existed near the pole beyond the ice pack. That idea shaped routes, expectations, and risk tolerance, turning the voyage into more than an exploratory cruise. It became a test of national capability and personal reputation. The topic also explores how exploration narratives were marketed to the public, creating pressure to produce dramatic results. Against that backdrop, the Arctic appears not just as a setting, but as an adversary to overconfidence, exposing the gap between maps and lived terrain. The book uses the Jeannette's launch as a case study in how institutions commit to high-risk projects, how leaders interpret incomplete information, and how optimism becomes policy when a mission is framed as historic and inevitable. Secondly, life aboard a ship held hostage by ice. Once the Jeannette becomes trapped, the expedition shifts from forward motion to a long experiment in coping. Sides presents the Arctic as a world governed by slow violence, pressure ridges, shifting flows, deep cold, and prolonged darkness that erodes morale as surely as it freezes equipment. This topic focuses on the daily systems that keep people alive when ordinary routines collapse. Food management, heating, clothing, and maintenance become strategic concerns, and the crew must balance discipline with psychological resilience. The ship itself turns into a fragile refuge that can be squeezed, lifted, or fractured by the pack. The narrative emphasizes how isolation reshapes time and decision-making, forcing officers and sailors to accept uncertainty as the norm. It also underscores the importance of scientific work and record-keeping, not only for the mission's stated goals, but as a stabilizing purpose that gives structure to months of confinement. Interpersonal dynamics matter. Trust in leadership, conflict containment, and the shared culture of seamanship are essential tools. Through this prolonged ordeal, the book shows that survival is rarely a single heroic act. It is an accumulation of small choices that conserve strength, sustain hope, and prepare for the moment when the ice finally dictates a new, harsher phase. Thirdly, leadership under extreme stress and the ethics of command. In polar catastrophe, leadership becomes both a technical skill and a moral test. The Jeannette story examines how commanders and officers weigh competing obligations, protect the crew, preserve the mission, and make decisions without reliable rescue prospects. Sides portrays leadership as a moving target, where good judgment must adapt to deteriorating conditions, limited supplies, and the unpredictability of the ice. This topic explores how authority is maintained when conventional signals of competence, such as navigation progress and operational control, are stripped away. It also looks at the ethics of risk, including when to push forward, when to retreat, and how to distribute hardship fairly. Decisions about rationing, medical care, and travel plans after disaster can determine who lives and who dies. And the book illustrates how even principled leaders face outcomes shaped by chance. The narrative also highlights the role of teamwork and delegated responsibility, showing that polar survival depends on networks of competence rather than a single savior figure. By emphasizing the human consequences of command decisions, the book invites readers to consider how leadership functions when there is no perfect option, only trade-offs. It becomes a study of character revealed under compression, where empathy, discipline, and realism must coexist. Fourthly, the overland march, logistics, starvation risk, and human endurance. The most dramatic shift occurs when the crew must abandon the ship and attempt an overland and coastal escape with sledges and boats. This topic focuses on the brutal arithmetic of survival, calories versus distance, shelter versus speed, and the constant threat of injury, frostbite, and exhaustion. Sides details the logistical complexity of moving men and equipment across unstable ice and frigid waters, where a small miscalculation can strand a party without fuel or food. The environment forces relentless improvisation, and the expedition's preparations are tested against realities that no plan can fully anticipate. The march also reveals how endurance is physical, mental, and social. The ability to keep marching depends on morale, fairness in distribution of labor, and the credibility of leaders who must motivate people beyond exhaustion. The book shows how suffering concentrates attention on essentials, stripping life down to movement, warmth, and the next meal. It also illustrates the fragility of groups under stress, as disagreements and fear can fracture cooperation. Yet moments of solidarity and competence shine, demonstrating the human capacity to persist when conditions are objectively inhuman. This segment of the story functions as an anatomy of expedition failure transformed into a disciplined retreat, with nature setting the rules and the travelers paying for every mile. Lastly, aftermath, search efforts, and the legacy of polar exploration, the Jeannette expedition does not end when the march ends. Its consequences ripple outward through families, institutions, and the broader history of exploration. This topic examines how news of disaster traveled, how authorities responded, and why search and rescue in the Arctic was so difficult in an era of limited communication. Sides presents the aftermath as a mixture of tragedy and meaning-making, where survivors, rescuers, and governments attempt to interpret what happened and assign responsibility. The story also touches on how artifacts, records, and scientific observations gain significance after the fact, contributing to knowledge about Arctic currents, geography, and the realities of ice drift. The expedition's legacy becomes a cautionary tale about hubris, but also an example of courage and professionalism in the face of unavoidable calamity. The book places the Jeannette within a lineage of polar voyages, showing how each failure informed later strategies, technologies, and attitudes toward risk. It also explores the public appetite for heroic narrative and the tension between celebration of endurance and honest appraisal of flawed premises. Ultimately, the legacy is complex. It includes losses that cannot be redeemed, but it also includes lessons about preparation, humility, and the limits of human control that remain relevant in modern discussions of exploration, crisis management, and organizational decision-making. In conclusion, this book is best suited for readers who enjoy narrative history, maritime adventure, and true survival stories grounded in documented events. It will also appeal to anyone interested in leadership, expedition planning, and the psychology of endurance, because the Jeannette saga shows how institutions and individuals respond when the environment removes all safety nets. The benefit to a reader's life comes from its clear demonstration that resilience is built through systems, relationships, and disciplined choices, not just bravery. It offers a memorable lens on how optimism can become a liability when it hardens into certainty, and how humility and adaptability can preserve life when plans collapse. Compared with many polar books that focus narrowly on a single hero or a straightforward march toward a goal, Sides delivers a wide-angle account that connects politics, science, seamanship, and human consequence. The result feels both epic and intimate, with enough context to understand why the voyage happened and enough detail to feel what it cost. If you want a gripping, carefully researched story that balances wonder with warning, this is a strong purchase that stands out among exploration histories for its narrative momentum and its sober, human-centered perspective. If you would like to support Hampton Sides, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.